Is Larry Brockin from Pradco.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thanks. Well, number one, I appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity to come to you all today and getting the invite from the chief and then Paul giving me that was very kind of you. As chief, he said on leave samples and stuff. You can pick what you want. What I wanted to do tonight is really to have a conversation. I'm not a trained speaker. I'm not one of those guys, not a sales guy. I'm a psychologist. But I do feel passionately, very passionately about safety forces, as well as other city departments. I mean, the chief's right. We do assessments for police departments, fire departments. Many communities bring us in for IT directors, streets people, public works, wastewater treatment. Why? It can be a 30-year pleasure or a 30-year headache. It costs a heck of a lot to get rid of somebody, not just money, reputation. Those people, and it's interesting the chief says, we think, well, why do you need to do a dispatcher? Hey, that's the first line when a citizen calls in. That's who they're talking to. So, really what I want to do tonight is, I got a script, but I want you to ask, and nothing's out of bounds. Ask whatever you want. Chief knows me well for these 8 years. I just like candid conversations. But I do want to throw out a question. How many of you are pleased with the way you select police officers, firefighters, dispatchers? How many of you, by show of hands, are pleased with the way you selected? Okay, all right. Well, this was worthwhile. Who knows? For those who didn't raise their hands, why not? If somebody didn't raise their hand, if you're not happy with it, what aren't you happy about?
The old boys network.
Okay, that can happen a lot. Who else isn't happy with what's going on?
Not a matter of being happy.
All right.
It's right now what we do is in our township is our fire chief is the person who is the go-to, and he does what he's the one that makes those decisions, as does our road crew.
And do they have training in psychology?
No.
I hope nobody ever does anything bad.
Well, he does because you have to deal with 30 different personalities.
Not quite the same.
Right. And people elect politicians, what are we going to do? Start checking the trustees? I think it's probably a good idea before they can get on the ballot.
Well, the one thing I'll say, though, maybe I'm wrong, but most trustees don't go about their daily business carrying a gun. Most trustees aren't in the back of a squad with a comatose patient or a child.
Oh, yeah, I am.
So that's why there's that's why there's a difference. That's why there's a difference. Pradco, and I'll leave it when I'm done. We work with about 120 agencies: police departments, fire departments, hospitals, universities. We've been in business. It's when I came in, I really never know since before. I think Sagamore Hills Township was formed. I think it's in 1947, if I recall correctly. We've been around since 1955. 60 years pretty much in business. We deal with everybody from Sagamore to the Cleveland Clinic to Ohio State to Youngstown PD, Strongsville PD, Fire, Solon. I can list 120 of them. Well, what I'm very proud to say is that really has come from, I'd say 80% word of mouth. It's one chief calling somebody else. I was talking over at the table. I got a call from someplace where I had no idea where it was. All of a sudden, we get a call from Mill Creek Metro Parks. I didn't know what that was. I know Cleveland Metro Parks. We do all their rangers. It's Mahoney County Metro Parks. All of a sudden, we're there. They say Youngstown PD wants to meet, and literally 3 days later, we're doing all the testing for the Youngstown Police Department. Never called on them. Never even knew anybody there. But typically we get involved in a community because there is some dissatisfaction. The old boy network? Sure. From our perspective, I don't care who's related to who. That doesn't make a damn bit of difference. Excuse the language. It's going to be, do they have the qualities that you want. So really, what does Pradco do? We do a lot of private sector things, but we work with 100 departments. I would say our business is 80% testing, 20% command staff development, or leadership development. That's where I was all day at Twinsburg. We're doing executive coaching because we have a version which is cheaper. We're doing with the public works people, the service directors. Testing really takes many forms. It can be the entry level. It can be the promotional. There's been a big shift because of the DROP program, which is the accelerated retirement program in the state, that we've been doing more and more of those promotional assessments. Sergeants, lieutenants, captains, many chiefs. We did the chief of the clinic, the chief of Mayfield Heights, we did the chief of Euclid. Typically there it's the mayor, the law director who are bringing us in to do it. But what we do, and where I think the difference is, and this may sound strange, when we do a psychological evaluation, we will flunk psychologically sound people. Why do you think we do that?
Test them.
What?
Test them. See how they react.
Kind of, but what I always say, and I think it's still true, we don't do a City of Cleveland psych, which is you're not clinically deviant, you have the job. You can be psychologically stable and be lazy. You can be psychologically stable and be rude. You can be psychologically stable and have poor judgment.
Yes.
So we will screen out. We will probably reject that. Ask the chief. We'll probably reject 30%.
I think it's higher than that.
It could be. That's a whole other story because of the flooding of the market, too. But that's a whole other story. The quality has gone down.
You're about right.
Yeah.
Do you find the capacity for common sense to be something that in your testing there's a delicate balance because the individual being evaluated is trying to give you the right answer and fighting within themselves for what
It'll
that
catch
internal.
that.
It's interesting. When we built these tests, there's a two-step process for fire and police. We worked with the police chiefs, 277 departments in the state of Ohio in 2001 to put a little kind of pre-screen together that they could use before polygraph and background. We worked with 200 fire departments to build one for the fire service. They were very clear. Those tests are not, I am dependable, true or false. I am dependable, yes or no. What it does, and it's purposeful, is that candidate is going to look at it and say, I provide good service to the citizens, 1A. 1B, I take feedback from my supervisor to improve. It's called a forced choice. They have to pick between two positive items. Mm-hmm. That way, I'll put $100,000 on the table if they can get a high score and everything, because mathematically they can't. Because it's amazing, and I'll show you some Alicia stuff. Someone will come across with, say, a low attitude, and that's attitude towards the chain of command. Never once did that candidate say they were low on attitude. But when attitude was paired up against compassion, courtesy, dependability, and all that other stuff, they always went the other direction. So it's a way to get by a person saying that I'm just terrific at everything. The chiefs were also very clear. When they do it on the screen, they can't skip anything. If they advance to the next page, because there's like 10 pairs on a page, they can't go back and change their answers again. Because people will try to say that they're just terrific. You know that's not true. Maybe the chief's perfect. I'm not. I'm impatient. I don't listen well. Okay? But I'm probably not going to say that. But if I'm taking one of those things, it'll probably come out. So we try to get away from just because somebody is trying, they can't fake it. We also look at this in a form of we want the data to line up. By that I mean, when we do, say, a psych eval on somebody, it is probably 6 to 6.5 hours worth of testing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's probably 3 hours work before they come in, and 2.5 hours, so maybe that's 5.5 or whatever. That's how long. It's not going to be a quick, you're not anxious, you're not rigid or type A, you got the job. There are a lot of people out there who the joke I made before is that everyone we interview is at the top of their class from the police academy. It's like, not everyone can be number one. I mean, but the market is flooded with these people. In the old days, if I recall correctly, you had to be sponsored to go to a police academy. Now it's open enrollment. So all they really care about, let's get everybody in. Doesn't really matter. I feel sorry actually for the kids, because some would have no chance of ever getting a job. But it doesn't matter. The college has got the money. So you have people out there who know. I mean, you can probably take a look at them and talk to them, but there's no way. But the whole idea is, you're not just hiring stability in terms of psychological stability. You're hiring work ethic. You're hiring motivation. You know, a big thing, especially in a suburban community, is how is that officer, how is that firefighter going to interact with the citizens? The last thing the chief wants is a citizen calling the mayor then calls the chief and says, what the heck was your guy doing there? We also realize that not every department's the same. Cop's not a cop. Just like a sergeant's not a sergeant. And that may seem a little bit weird, but when we do an officer for Maple Heights, inner ring suburb of Cleveland, we're not looking for the exact same qualities as Chagrin Falls. There's a different expectation. The old joke is a Hunting Valley, which is like, I drive through it once or twice, but the houses in Hunting Valley, they average $1.5 million. It is the job of every police officer in Hunting Valley to know each dog by name. God is my witness.
That's the truth. And all the people that are there and get their little butt home
Exactly.
safely without an
Maple
incident.
Heights, you might have a murder at the gas station. It's a whole different environment. So a more rough and ready person would probably do very well in Maple Heights, but no way. The Cleveland Clinic brought us in to do their officers. Why? They're having a lot of turnover. Mm-hmm. They were hiring young, aggressive people out of the academy, and then you go to the Cleveland Clinic, the main campus downtown, and one of your assignments, one of your assignments could be to be a crossing guard. The guys went nuts, and they took off. That was costing a lot of money. They needed a different profile. Just like when we do the Cleveland Metro Parks Rangers, it may be 95% customer service, but 5% the drug busts. So depending on what that community needs, the profile is going to change. So that's why I say we go beyond just, are you stable? Stable doesn't get you across the finish line with our stuff. And to our departments, that's just not enough. So are we perfect? Of course not. But when we have gone back to the departments and these are criteria of at least 3 years on the job with satisfactory or better performance, our hit rate's about 91%. And we get ticked off when we miss, and the chief will know that because we take it extremely seriously. But our client is not the person who's wanting the job. Our client is you. And how much money does it cost if you have to get rid of a poor employee? Probably Jeff knows to a certain extent, but it's a lot of money. You could probably test 100 people for the cost of having to get rid of one bad employee. So it's a whole idea. So it's personalizing. We personalize the testing for that specific department. Okay. Another thing we do, which might be a little bit different, and this got us into Elyria and Youngstown, is sometimes for the psychologicals, they don't give you a bottom line. If then maybe kind of thing, which was totally foreign to us because we give a bottom line for somebody. Poor, good, or strong. Some departments want a marginal. That's cool. But it's not going to be, well, here's what it is, kind of make up your mind. We also don't get into a 5-page report telling you about the guy's childhood and his parents and his sisters and all that. Who cares? Asking the HR director, they don't want you to have that in your files anyway because it's not job relevant. So when we put a report together, we put it together so it can be given to an FTO or a training officer. Because we want the department to know, yeah, this guy's a good fit, but here's the stuff you can help him with. Here are the things to watch out for. We make it very behavioral. So it's a whole different level of testing. And we always make it clear, like if someone calls us in for a meeting and if they say, we're looking for you to decide. What I will always say, we were just at Metro Health. They're using us. If all you want to say is we recommend somebody because they're stable, then we're not your company. We don't do that. Because you're going to end up making some serious hiring mistakes. I'll take a breath there. You can tell I get passionate because I really get into it.
So listen, could I hire you for a relationship kind of evaluation?
I don't really care about the relationship. I just want to know if you do the job. That's all I really care about.
Hey, I'll help Larry here for a second. We're in a fire district, and we had a candidate that did testing, and it was for part-time employment, but on the testing it came back that he had a very low integrity level. And when it went to vote, we had a number of candidates. This guy, it went 4-2. His integrity was so low, there were 4 votes against putting him on versus 2 for him. And one of the trustees that voted said, there's a lot of things you can work on with an employee candidate. You can work with them and improve things on, but how do you improve somebody's integrity if they don't have it to begin with? So, and I really thought that was an important point. When he made that point, I'm thinking that's exactly right. I mean, it's low. How are you going to improve that? It's something that's inert. And it came through in that testing in our fire district that we're in. And I know that since we've used them, we went from the police to our secretaries. And that's really worked out well. We have very, very good women that work here and answer the phone professionally and are professional all the time. And we haven't had any complaints on any of our personnel. Our police department has, as far as grievances, I don't know if we've had one in 5 years. Have we had one in 5 years?
Very few.
I don't think we've had a grievance in 5 years. So the people we're hiring, compared to when I first started, we used to have a plethora of problems here. They're gone. They're completely gone. And there's been actually, since I started back in 92, I think the entire department's turned over. They've either people retired, they went to other departments, some have been terminated. But since 92, I think the entire police department is pretty much different from the day I started when Rosemary was here. And the candidates we have now, every one of them is here to protect and serve. We really have some really good people. And I attribute that to the testing that we've been doing. And the trustees stay out of it. We don't get involved. We don't know any of the candidates. We have nothing to do with it. And then what we do to make sure that the process is going through, we like to have those results sent to our attorney. So if there ever is a problem, we could go to court and say, we tested these people. And then he has that if he has to defend the township. So it's really worked out well for Sagamore Hills. And it costs a little bit. What's it for a candidate? The whole process is what, $750?
The initial one that we always, since I've been here, send them to the final one, which is what, 780 or
725.
725. The final one's 725. We always sent, since I've been here, every candidate before we hired to that one. But I came to Larry and said, I'm sending a lot of people that are failing at that level. How can I streamline this more? And he has a sort of an entry assessment for $135.
Yeah, $130. Yeah.
$130. And like I said, before I introduced him, I'll have like 5 candidates I'm looking at, and that'll eliminate 2 of them. So if we get to the 725 mark, I might only send 2 or 3 instead of 5. And he's right. There is about a 1 out of 3 that I send that are failed. And for me, our process we have now, by the time they're done field training, I'm spending over $10,000 on a police officer to get them through from the first interview with the board that we have set up here on through field training. But like Jeff will attest to, $10,000 is nothing compared to lawsuits. And I was here shortly for 4 months, and we got hit hard by a past employee that hit us for $650,000. So $10,000 per employee is nothing compared to paying out $650,000.
Our carrier may have paid.
Yeah, we did. But still.
Just be relaxed.
Yes, calm
I think that's
prevails.
actually confidential, but
Yeah.
No, it wasn't.
Was it a paper?
well, they figured it out. Let's put it that way. The lawyer said it wouldn't be talked about, but somehow it was.
And this is kind of an awkward position because I'm usually talking about a topic as opposed to quote making it kind of a sales presentation, but in a certain way the stuff sells itself. Because I didn't come up with this system. We've been doing this, God, for how long now? Mentor PD's been a client for 30 years. Predates me. I only got 20 years at Pradco. But, I'm just thinking, past 2 weeks, we have now instituted models. That's where we profile the department for the qualities they're looking for. One was Elyria brought us in because they were losing 25% of their people in the appeal program. That's a lot of money to go through. And Shaker Heights. Believe me, Elyria and Shaker Heights have totally different looks. It's fascinating. Shaker Heights came out very high. The things focusing on were teamwork, courtesy, composure, compassionate, attitude.
But it's a transitional community also. It's not the Shaker Heights of years ago.
Correct, but the expectations of the officers in Chief Lee are still much more towards the people element. Because you could say, and it was fascinating, there's a dimension called attitude. Chief Hayes and I have talked about that a lot. That's attitude towards your boss. The best officers at Shaker Heights were in the 62nd percentile. Average is 35 to 65, so that's skewing up. Do you know where the less effective officers average? 16th.
Oh my.
So we now, as they're starting to test, we have a profile of what the best officer qualities look like. Now, Elyria, that's a tougher place. Okay? Oh, yeah.
That's our neighbor. Just take it easy.
Okay. All right. So, Chief Whiteley, man, that was the toughest meeting I ever was at. I didn't know him, and I'll just say this. I don't think he probably would get a kick out of it. Walked in, sat down. Chief Hayes knows I'm not the most assertive guy in the world. I'll stand up for what I believe, but whatever. Chief looks at me with a stare and says, go. All right. I start telling about the process like we're doing here, kind of the same way. I stop for a question. Nothing. Then he goes, is that it? I said, yeah, it can be. He says, good. I just wanted to see what this is. You're starting. Kind of thing. I just bring that up because it was just amazing. Go ahead.
What do you do? This is very interesting. What do you do in a community, though, where you have been invited in to evaluate, and they already have that 16% that are not reflect a poor attitude, and probably a lot of other levels of things are low. What do they do? I mean, you have those people already on your payroll. Do you have counseling then, or some kind of learning stations that you bring in to help them facilitate and upgrade themselves, so to speak?
Not really. No. I would say that we do coaching for managers to help with leadership skills, but it's our belief you're not going to change anybody's personality. If you're crude or discourteous, I don't think you're going to train anybody. My thing is, if you have officers who are displaying qualities that are not acceptable, that should be in a performance review. There should be a paper trail. Either they shape up or they don't. It's not for us. Unfortunately, in the safety forces, in some departments, they wait for the next guy to take care of the problem. And that problem employee keeps on with the department. I would say, have your justification. If that person's not meeting standards, there should be documentation, performance improvement plan, set the goals. Either the person shapes up or they don't.
Do you work with any sheriff's departments?
No, we don't.
That's a shame.
They typically are not receptive.
I can't imagine why.
And
Old boys?
yeah, so we don't work. There's only one time we were brought in because there was that old boy network, we were brought in to do the testing, and that sheriff turned things around. But once he was out of office, we never got a call back. The one guy wanted to straighten it out. But we've left many a message with departments, but you know probably better than me. I don't know why. We just have never been able to work with them. The cities bring us in, the townships, the hospitals, the universities, but not the sheriff's departments.
And I can answer part of that question. As far as that 16% that you maybe a chief will inherit, I know when Dave came in, when we have a personnel or employee problem at the time, we don't have it now, Dave would call him in and say, we're going to talk about your conduct. I'm going to take this conversation for your protection of mine. And he would take that, and these people who were low on the totem pole were given the message that this is the way we're going to operate. And, you're either going to come along for the ride, or you're going to have to find another place to go. Because any of that conduct he wasn't going to tolerate. Now, I will tell you this. It worked out very well because he delegated through the sergeants and the lieutenants. And so if you had a sergeant and a patrolman that were real tight, and they were buddy-buddy, and they were both goofballs, the sergeant had to discipline the patrolman. And he expected, he demanded that our patrolman patrol. At one time, you could come up here on Saturday, and you'd have the entire department up here in the parking lot for 4 or 5 hours. It's the safest place in
Those
Saturday.
donut exchanges are timely.
Now, all of our guys are on the road patrolling. We have a program at night. They put cards in people's paper box saying we were here at 2 in the morning, all is safe and quiet. And they monitor that. So our guys give out business cards at night to every resident in the year saying we were here at 3 in the morning, all was well. And that's gone over really big in the township, and the chief's done a wonderful job of having people come in here, work their shift, and go home. There's no extracurriculars. They're very professional, and they all seem to be very happy because it's very good leadership. And I have to say, we got the leader we deserve. This testing, we went through, prior to the chief coming on board, we had 3 police chiefs prior to him. And they were hiring without psychological testing. And we said, you have to hire with psychological. And they just arbitrarily waived it. And we didn't know that. We didn't know they were waiving it. When we got wind of it, we started saying we need to get somebody that's running the show properly here. And so, actually, the last 8 years, Rosemary will tell you, were highly enjoyable, weren't they? Highly enjoyable.
And he makes a good sandwich.
Yeah.
We produce the condiments.
Yeah. We take them on that one. But so the point is, we typically will come in at the request of, you were the guy who called first. I remember you coming out to the office, you and then I think Jeff did, to talk about it. Either it comes from the trustees, township officials, city officials, and say, okay, we got to make this fairer and better. They drive it, or a new chief will come in and say, no, it's not because you were somebody's cousin or something you got the job. That stuff's out the window. So either it's being driven from the public officials or from the leadership of the police and the fire departments. Yeah.
And I'm looking more towards Paul for this.
Okay.
All right. I live in Geauga County now. And I had a burglary a couple of years ago, and it took almost 40 minutes for the sheriff to get there. And I'm wondering, though, because not all of the communities in Geauga County have their own police department. Some of them do.
Right.
But when you're under the sheriff's department, would something like the program you're talking about, Paul, where they're leaving a notice that they are actually patrolling, because that is a question with a lot of people because they have limited cars for the county. And it is a fragmented, at best, situation of coverage. Would something like that work, do you think, Paul? I mean, I'm thinking it would, but I'm looking to you because you just are glowing with the fact they did
we're
this.
11 and a half square mile township, and that's a priority 1 call. And I can say in the last 8 years, and we track this, in the last 8 years, on any priority 1 call, we've been there in less than 3 minutes. We haven't had a priority 1 call where an officer showed up after 3 minutes. we've had somebody on scene before 3 minutes.
In my case, I got to the house while the burglar was in the house. And I went across the street because it would have been much better if I'd have just gotten my gun and gone through the house. But I took their advice and I went across the street, and 40 minutes later when the sheriff got there, they had a dog in the car. They never even took the dog out of the car to try and deal with anything. And after the sheriff left, whoever burglarized my house was parked in the woods behind my house and left. I heard them leave. It's like 1:30 in the morning. And I mean, just what you're saying, though, would instill confidence because I'm a person fractured by what was available to myself.
No, I think what he did would be good. What I would also say is I question the sheriff's deputy who wouldn't take the dog out of the car. To me, and that's not being psychological.
It was raining?
Well, that's nice. Whatever. But my point is, if all they looked for was psychological instability, that's fine. You can be lazy and be psychologically fine.
Mm-hmm.
But if we see what we test initiative, we test results, and if that person's not willing to step up, we're not going to recommend somebody who they have to kick in the backside to get going.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the departments are looking
That would
for.
have done Dan in.
Absolutely.
So it's taken it to a whole, again, I use it, it's not the old style. Yeah, we gave them a psych. A lot of places, that still means we give them an MMPI, which we don't even use, because everybody fakes the damn thing, so we got rid of it 15 years ago. MMPI is the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, which was normed on Minnesota farmers in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, we use the INWAL, developed for safety forces 20 years ago, normed on law enforcement, security, and fire. But they can be fine clinically on that thing, but we'll still reject them. They're rude. They think they know it all. The best case I can remember is we saw a guy, it was for Kent State University, because we've done it for years, for Chief Peach and Bill Buckby. He was an officer, and he was already a police officer. He came in, he was psychologically fine, but God forbid you told this guy he ever did anything wrong or ever had anything he needed to work on. He would just total chip on his shoulder. We rejected him. Okay, what's the first thing that he did? He called in and yelled at our secretaries. Not the coolest thing to do. Beyond that, he went to Kent State, had Bill come out, Bill Buckby. Best way I can describe him is like the Southern gentleman. Yeah, he's definitely an authority, but more soft-spoken, thoughtful, strategic. Bill came out, the guy came up, and threw a temper tantrum. You don't know what the heck you're doing. You're making the biggest mistake in your life. And all that Bill thought was, thank God, we don't have this guy. He was an officer. We reject people who are already police officers. We reject people who are already firefighters. You don't know what process they went through. You don't know if they were good where they were at. They'll tell you they were terrific. And everybody tells you the truth. You're making a big investment. Probably over the course of someone's career, you'll be paying them between, I know you will, easily millions of dollars. It's one heck of an investment. I'd rather you give that money to somebody who deserves it. And the way that I look at it, if we bring in somebody who's not that good, we're depriving a good person of a job. That's not right. So it's a whole different way of looking at it. I'll just speak like 2 minutes on promotionals, then I'll just stop and leave for questions. We do promotionals, we do the same thing. What are you looking for in that sergeant? Do you have younger officers? Okay, then you need that sergeant to be a better teacher, a better coach. You have an undisciplined operation? I need that lieutenant to be high in structure, high in follow-up. We behaviorally define those leadership characteristics you want. And then use a similar process what Chief talked about, what he went through. You know, we don't, where we have done more and more of these is we replace the assessment centers. Why? You can go online.
You can be coached.
What? Beyond being coached, for any of you using a fire assessment center right now, you can go online and it gives you page by page how to do each exercise. And they use the same exercise time after time. So those have turned into another book test. What I say is through our assessment, which is lengthy, which is tough, we test what a person is likely to do, not what they know they should do. Most people know what they should do, but they don't always do it. Go ahead.
I came from a 1,500 officer department in Maryland, and I had never been tested in my ability to critically think until I went to this company. Now, how can you be the second most violent county in the country, and for a promotional test, they do a written test at an assessment center, and they never once check to see if you had the ability to be high in critical thinking. And like you said, everybody that scored high on a written test studied for X amount of hours and months, and everybody that scored high on the assessment center went and paid $1,500 to be coached. And then they promoted based on that. And I got back his report, critical thinking. I never heard of that before.
Unfortunately, I see in the state of Ohio, you have some assessors who also run a coaching business on the side. Ethically, I have a big issue with that. I'm actually grading and being a tester for the assessment center, but then I'm coaching guys and getting money for coaching them.
Wow.
Big issue with that.
Yeah.
Also, for our reports, a lot of times for an assessment center, you get 85, you get a score back. For any promotional report we do, we give a 5-page report. Motivation, here's all the strengths, areas to work on. Leadership, here's all the strengths to work on. Because if you're smart, that should be information you can use to help that person who gets the job make the transition. For those people who don't get the job, it gives them information. They know what they need to work on. So we believe in giving just more than a number back. We give you a number for ranking. But to us, that's not enough. Last thing I'll say about the testing, because this has been an issue for some places, turnaround. We turn around our psychologicals within 2 business days. Okay? We don't need to lose somebody because you're waiting for the report from the psychologist. Promotionals, 4 days. So it never has to take anybody that long to get the results back. Sometimes, and I think, Chief, you're one of them, it's like, I need the results fast. We'll give them a verbal the next day. We're not going to rush it, but if we can give a verbal answer and then the report follows the next day, we'll do it. We also will get a person in within 3 days. It's not a one-man operation. Pradco has 22 people. We have 5 or 6 people who do this day after day. Any week, this week I think we got Tri-C in, North Royalton, Neomed, which is the medical school, Kent State University, and Youngstown. That's just this week. Also something we do for any safety force evaluation, it goes through a double-blind review process. I'm making sure you know this. That anytime we're looking at somebody, the person does the case and writes the report. Before it goes out, there's a second psychologist who looks through all the data, everything, and signs off on it. That way no one can ever say, well, he didn't like me. Yeah, but somebody else also had to sign off on all that information. It's a pretty stringent process, but there are not a hell of a lot of jobs out there where people are carrying guns and responsible for keeping people alive. That's why, at least in our opinion, you need to go that extra mile. So
I'll add one thing, and when you read them, if you take a good look at yourself, you know that for somebody that's never met you, this is the most accurate that anybody could do. I took it home and showed my wife, and there was a negative I had that said, if not interested in something, we'll procrastinate. And she goes, that is you.
And the last thing I will say, I guess this will be the last thing I say, knock on glass Underwood. In all the stuff we do, no lawsuits, no evidence of any adverse impact, never taken to court through 120 agencies. Because it's so face valid. It's going to be hard to argue against a process which has such a foundation in the data and what that community needs. So, appreciate the opportunity. I'd like you to open it up for any questions.
Could I pass them out so they could look?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And then maybe they question you on that.
Sure.
Just so you know, I don't know if anybody's doing this, but Chief Hayes, if you're not doing it, it's something you might want to consider. He's got our patrolmen giving oxygen and defibrillation. So on a heart attack, we are the first responders. We're typically there before the fire department. And we have actually saved people's lives long enough for the fire department to transport them and really follow through on it. Every officer in a department has oxygen and defibrillation training, and it's really a service-oriented police department. And we've had a lot
Those two you have in your hand now.
thank you notes over years. You saved my husband's life.
Is there like an example one?
I just brought one. I didn't bring 15 examples.
Oh, I can go copy.
I like that card thing, though, that to stop by, because that is something that a lot of people wonder about. Where are they?
Whatever you do.
This is the final report.
Yeah.
What would you say your cost for your police department is?
We operate, we have 11 full-time officers, and I think it's 5 part-time officers, and our budget's $1.5 million a year.
We got more full-time officers than we get deputies.
All right. And we have our own dispatch center, so we have 4 full-time dispatchers. It's $1.5 million a year.
That's right. That's just, by the way,
I guess I'm curious, what are people's reactions to this?
interesting.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, please.
Do you do this with volunteer fire departments? Is it something that would work with volunteer fire departments?
Over there.
It would. A lot of times it depends on the budget of the department. But the way that I look at it, some people will say, well, someone will say, well, this would make sense only for my full-time firefighters or for my full-time police officers, and not the part-time. But to that person who's waiting for the officer or waiting for the paramedic, it doesn't make any difference for them whether they're part-time or full-time. The expectations are the same. To the volunteer, are they still kind of, let me put it this way, are you liable for the actions of the volunteer firefighter?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
That's what I would, yeah. So in that instance, I would say, yeah, they represent your entity.
Carl, do they get paid an hourly rate though? They get a run rate.
It's a run, not an hourly rate? Ours is hourly.
Yeah. So even though ours used to be volunteer, but really it's a part-time job.
Yeah, workman's comp, you gotta...
It's really a part-time job because they're getting an hourly. When they're there, they get 20 an hour or 15 an hour. So they're really part-time employees.
$8.95. Well, my understanding, I guess my question comes down to more the, like we're trying to do an assessment of the say the fire chief and the assistant chief.
Yeah.
What would be a good way to do that? Assess the entire.
Let me put it this way. What is your objective? What's your objective in doing that? What are you trying to do?
I would like to get the best person. Well, the thing is we already have a fire chief.
Right.
But is he really the best person on the department to be the chief?
This is an actual sample.
I would say you don't.
Yeah,
We
that
don't
was
come
different.
into an agency to say whether that person. In other words, you don't test to take a guy out of a job.
Thank you.
All right. You can test and do what is called developmental report. How do you make the guy better? But we would not come in to say, he's not right, now we can get rid of him. We just don't do that.
Okay.
We do, though, is if you have an open captain spot or an open lieutenant spot, we do a leadership assessment for that job before they actually go into the job.
Well, and see, we just had a position that we just filled, and after listening to this tonight,
That is
I wish
interesting.
we had done something a little different.
Yeah, to do that for potential trustees.
Or, and also, as you're pointing out, this leadership, a yearly assessment on
Yeah.
the people, developmental type thing,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
where you can say, okay, listen, here's your strengths,
Especially
here's
since
your
they
weaknesses.
hired
That we do. I mean, we've done that, gone into a department and done that for the command staff. Typically not to the line firefighter, but we have gone in and done that kind of work for a department. But here's my thing I would say is, don't spend the money
And they just
unless someone plans to
hired
use
this
that information
company
to help those guys improve.
probably
Otherwise, it's a waste of money.
September.
You can talk non-sales. I'm saying don't do it unless you plan to do something with that information. Otherwise, there's no reason to do it. But I'll come down to, like I said before, it either has to be somebody like you or a chief who says we need this.
Right.
It has to come from the top.
It's
It's gotta
I
come
agree
from
with
the
that
top.
100%.
Yeah. I think the gentleman next to you had a question. He was raising his hand.
Yeah, I just was curious about your credentials, and you mentioned we on a number of occasions.
Oh, yeah.
What's on your team? Who are the we's?
I'm an industrial organizational PhD psychologist, vice president at Pradco, been there 20 years. Other individuals when I say Pradco has 22 professionals. psychologists who would do this kind of work. We also have people who are like OD, organizational development, who do training and coaching. The company's been around for 60 years, and we basically have teams. So in other words, there's a safety force team that does this over and over to get not only familiar with what we do, but what does that community do? So we get to know the clinic, we get to know Solon, we get to know the metro parks, we get to know Sagamore to say, is that the right individual for what that department requires?
Is that team pretty much from this environment, or is that team put together from specialists from New York and California, or?
We're all Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah, we're right around here. I'd say most of us are Cleveland, Akron to Columbus, but most of us in the Cleveland office are from Cleveland.
Most of that team, how many psychologists did you say you employed?
There's 22 on staff, but that includes administrative staff. We have our own IT director. I don't know, like 13, 14 maybe?
Those are full-time psychologists?
Yeah.
Wow.
We probably, well, if you figure, we have about 120 what I call municipal/safety force clients. Mm-hmm. In private sector clients, we probably run about 400.
So psychologists then monitor the tests that are given, or choose the tests that are given, or combination of both?
It's monitored, developed, critiqued all the time, yes.
And this is their educational background and their specialty?
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if there's any other questions, we can adjourn the meeting. We can ask more questions, or
I've got a question.
Go ahead, Dan.
For him, it's for you.
Oh.
Are all these people that you have on staff, have they been tested?
You bet. Got to live what you preach.
I just wondered.
Yeah, no, it's a good question.
Do they fit into the profile of what you're trying to do with the company?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, they don't. That's why they keep
Most people won't ask the question because they figure that's the case. I just wanted
to ask the question.
I wanted to see his reaction, and if he was.
They do the profile. They do the critical thinking that he took. They do the
profile.
They do all these indexes. And if they don't have this, basically we have 3 core values:
Pardon?
service, quality, integrity. Those are the 3 we stand on. That's why, let's put it this way: Chief Hayes would call and say, I really want that guy. I like him. What do you think? Could you change it? Hell no. You're paying us to take a stand. If all of a sudden we cave in because somebody likes somebody, this becomes really emotional. Where I'll put it very clearly. A lot of times I'll kind of present to a union, and I'll say, you know what, if your chief of mayor comes up and says, well, we want that guy to get it, I'm going to say, you think we're going to risk 120 departments because your mayor wants somebody? There is no way. I'll walk away. And I'll tell them, this probably isn't the nicest way to say it, I'll say, you know what, you're just not that important. We're not going to put a whole business at stake because somebody wants somebody to get a job. We'll walk away.
Good call.
What we do here, we have an interview panel of supervisors from the police department. I don't sit on them. My philosophy is I'm not going to work with them for 20 years. I probably won't be here that long. You guys are going to work with them for the majority of the career. They screen them. We screen resumes, then they screen the applicants. I send the initial batch of thumbs up people to him. They're screened further. I send them the polygraph tests. The background investigation is started. And then we send a few candidates to the final one. Then we hire them, and then we field train them for 450 hours. The only thing I can say is there's no crystal ball, but I feel comfortable with the process that we've made here, that it's almost as good as a crystal ball by the time they're done their field training, that they're going to make it. And Pradco is a large part of that crystal ball, the proverbial crystal ball.
Is your retention rate pretty high?
Part-time's tough because if I do all this and I get a good candidate, well, in a part-time situation, guess what? They're not going to be here very long. Since I've instituted this process and we're getting that good of a quality person, I've found out that I probably lose part-timers pretty quick because after a year, 2 years at best, they're probably going to go somewhere full-time with the same process that they made it through here. If they can make it here, they can probably make it somewhere else. So full-timers, no. I've not had a full-timer in 8 years that I hired under this process that went somewhere else.
Good. That's great.
Good.
Any other questions? If not, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Dick,
Yes.
before you do that, I'd like to report on the hospitality room.
Oh, jeez. All right.
I have your room, okay, and we'll be open Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Friday night. And we approved the finances and stuff at the last meeting, so we'll
Okay.
bring you up to date.
Thank you.
I want to say one last word. No, thank you very much for the opportunity. And my cards are here, all the stuff. You can always call at any time. The one thing I didn't mention that I think is important, we don't work by contracts. A community only uses us as long as they're happy.
Oh, really?
So you're never locked into anything, correct? Which keeps us on our toes, too.
Wow.
That's a change.
That's how good they are.
It's the way we operate.
Wow, that's a change. That's a good change.
Good people operate.
I don't say that's not with a handshake. That's the open before contract. That's good.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, host department, Township. I'll make the motion to adjourn. Mike seconds.
Mike second.
All in favor?